Welcome to this presentation on the astrology of Charlie Kirk as it's connected to the greater planetary influence of Pluto on the United States and that having implications of political violence. So I'm Altazar, spiritual astrologer with over 35 years experience. It's my intention in this video to demonstrate how spiritual astrology reveals the negative karma or predisposition of character, which I'm also evolving as forensic astrology, and how that, in this case, is applied to Charlie Kirk and his alleged assassin, Tyler Robinson, and how it can be demonstrated through their astrological configurations, how they've been brought together and are associated with the greater transformational challenge being activated by Pluto in association with the United States. So I'll start by making a preliminary important point that I am not promoting a, a political ideology here or supporting any political party or political orientation. My objective is more purely to demonstrate that spiritual astrology and its context in forensic astrology can demonstrate a certain truth about who people are and a greater truth associated with a divine plan in the universe that can be towards good or towards a negative obstruction or difficulty. So I will just briefly summarize the perspective that spiritual astrology draws on and how it's the basis for this orientation of interpretation. That this point of view is not a belief system. So this is not supporting any kind of religion per se. It's spiritual astrology is about offering evidence that can be confirmed in a person's life experience. We're going to be looking at the chart of Charlie Kirk and the astrology chart of Tyler Robinson, the alleged assassin or shooter, uh, and interpret what their chart shows about them as people and their potential attitudes, beliefs, and behavior, karma that might help explain what or contributes to what has happened recently. But furthermore, uh, I will put that in the context of the planet Pluto. If you have viewed any of my recent videos on Pluto and its connection and its movement in a horoscope context to the astrology chart of the United States, you'll see that I have made a discussion about Pluto's return, which takes 240 plus years to return to its original birth position as it occurred in the United States charts of July 4th, 1776. And what is the symbolism of Pluto in any person's chart, let alone the chart of the United States? Well, Pluto represents your most intense potential healing process for accessing the psychological and emotional wounds that fuel the fear-based mental chatter of your ego that blocks you from a deeper experience of joy and higher consciousness and wisdom. In a sense, it's it's representative of the battle between um, the universe's attempt to further evolve the experience of love, compassion, acceptance, tolerance, honesty, truth, care, compassion, altruism, humanitarianism, universality, and one's awareness of their interconnectedness with all of life and beings, regardless of whether you're uh, a Caucasian, Afro-American, Chinese, Indian, uh, that beyond the surface of appearance and materialistic separation, we are on a deeper level energetically, all connected to this greater divine light force. And Pluto is part of the attempt to help evolve individuals and or whole nations and their political, cultural, economic, political structure towards these greater universal virtues versus attachment to materialism and separation of the promotion that ego is about superiority or superiority complex orientation, which fuels judgmentalism, prejudice, defensiveness, self absorption, narcissism, and gaslighting to view and or does view uh, enemies or needs enemies to substantiate its superiority and therefore justifies lying, deception, continuous tension, competitiveness with the world. So Pluto presented itself originally with the American Revolution as the attempt to overthrow that kind of political egoic exploitation of King George and the English country's control over the American colonies, and it's the denial of the democracy for the American colonial people to determine their own political, culture, and economic freedom. So now we're going to move into the charts and see how this comes down to a more microcosmic view of uh, Charlie Kirk and its relationship to this Pluto transformation. So I'm now going to bring up the chart of Charlie Kirk. I don't have his exact birth time, which is not necessary for a good 80% of the information we're going to get from his chart. I use 12 noon as a midpoint, along with the chart of the United States, as we will see that context. So One additional point now that I'd like to mention before we get into looking at Charlie Kirk's chart is that Pluto, the experience of a Pluto transit in any person's chart or in that of a country, and I have shared in the previous videos that Pluto had been going in the past 7 years or so through Capricorn and coming to its birth position at 27 degrees Capricorn in the chart of the United States. It's currently in around 1 or 2 degrees Aquarius, but it's still flirting around this area of the chart of the United States, symbolic of the cultural, economic, political crisis of the United States at this time associated with the challenge of a plutocracy or an elite segment of the population, in our case, the billionaires, who, in their 1/10 of 1% of our population, control over 40% of the economic resources, not to mention the power of their billions to buy elections, given the Supreme Court's ruling on Citizens United. So we're in the Second American Revolution at this time as to whether or not the masses of our population will stand up against any political, economic, cultural philosophies that are trying to repress the democratization of our society, which lends towards a more equitable, equal input by the masses of people towards their freedom for economic, political, and even cultural, religious, as well as free speech expression. So, where does Charlie Kirk fit into this? Now, the Pluto point of view is that our current plutocracy, if you want to place some names like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, others, they don't come to Mark Zuckerberg, you know, uh, even Bill Gates or others. Uh, these are those who, and amongst many other in the cabinet of Donald Trump, uh, who want to maintain political power and control. And one way that that's done just throughout the millennia of civilizations is to keep the masses of people struggling against themselves and or fighting amongst themselves through artificial uh, distortions of separation, such as race, class, immigration status, sexuality, to name a few. So uh, when we look at the chart of Charlie Kirk, we see here that he is a Libra and he has a Sun and Jupiter conjunction in Libra, which would, for any person who has a Sun, Jupiter is a benefic planet. It's a planet of positivity, expansion, optimism, philosophy, uh, a natural inclination towards being a public relations minister of some kind. So, and as a Libra, and in the segment of Libra connected with Gemini, he's a communicator and someone who's out there to really be there, an animated and confident public relations type, and someone who can be a promoter in their own belief system, that is, of uh, what they consider a favorable direction for the evolution of society. And yet, uh, people are complex and people have a mixed karma, positive or otherwise. And so we see that Charlie Kirk with a Sun Jupiter conjunction has a trine to the planet Saturn in Aquarius. And that is the karma of someone who has, through lifetimes, evolved a confidence and a somewhat uh, strategic ability to evaluate the material, political, economic conditions of the world and society and work hard at evolving almost as a bootstrapper pulls themselves up by their own bootstrap, uh, an identity and a profession and a connection with the socioeconomic political structure of contemporary society towards a position of leadership or uh, significant impact. So that's undeniable. There, many people may have that. It's not judgment of right or wrong, correct political correctness or not, Democrat or Republican. You know, people on either side of the idol or ideology can have this karma that generally implies those who have ascended to significant public relations, political, cultural leadership. And yet, when we look at these multiple squares here, we see that not only his Sun and Jupiter, which do represent the fundamental evolving path of self-actualization for an individual, is in what we call a karmically adverse aspect to a Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. Now, many people born in his generation in the early 90s have this conjunction, which is Uranus is about political connection to the world and or organizational connection. And Capricorn is about making it a connection to the political economic structure of the world or society uh, in some collective way or with an organization to promote a certain Neptune in Capricorn, a certain ideology, philosophy, uh, belief system that they would tend to want to meld or match or uh, integrate into their uh, ideological, political, or intellectual activism. And so the square implies that they may tend to have an excessive, even zealous passion for that political, spiritual, ideological, even religious uh, sense of correctness or uh, preference for affecting society. And the square implies the inclination to be radical about it. In other words, it implies those who may come also from prior lifetimes and have the spiritual karmic challenge of to what extent they may be offering political, ideological, philosophical, spiritual preferences or influences towards society, but whether they're doing it in a way that promotes understanding and uh, a more harmonious way of evolving the dialogue of and or differences in dialogue of those political, ideological, philosophical, or spiritual points of view. Uh, this square does imply a proclivity towards excessive passion and activism and belief in their superiority and or correct ideological, spiritual, or religious approach to the extent to which they are inclined to, uh, with a certain degree of impatience with the world or society or opposing or different pluralities of society, uh, hammer away at society with, if you will, more shocking and confrontational approaches. So therefore can actually uh, becoming coming across so forcefully with their belief system and uh, let's say superiority or correctness that they are considered radical by lots of segments of society and or even agitate uh, conflict or enemies. And then let me uh, point out this other side here. And before I do, let me just say this, that this Mercury-Mars conjunction implies someone who has an extraordinarily aggressive and quick mind and mental ability, intellectual ability. And in aspect to the Uranus-Neptune associated with, as I've talked about, their philosophy and ideology, uh, have a very uh, well rehearsed ability to draw on all their ideas, conceptions, and associations with their philosophy and alleged virtues to be engaged in quite aggressive debate and ideological struggle. Uh, the Mercury, Mars, and this conjunction, in also the Uranus Neptune square, implies that Charlie Kirk could have been a leftist radical communist or an alt-right conservative extremist. See, there's no definitive uh, political philosophy or ideological or philosophical or religious slant implicated here. What is clearly implicated is that Charlie Kirk is a highly, karmically as well, uh, highly evolved intellectual who has been able to embrace uh, an ideology and philosophy and political economic sensibility connected to that ideology. And confidently and in a self-reliant, if you will, bootstrapping fashion with keen perceptivity. That's Mercury Mars in Scorpio, with a keen perceptivity of the pulse of the emotional, political sensibilities of the population, evolve political economic strategies and public relations communications that can be highly effective. And I would venture to say that he was. Not that again, I don't necessarily agree, and I quite honestly don't agree with a majority of what he espoused. Uh, but I do respect the this that his political savvy and his intelligence and confidence to have put himself out there and made something of himself in, unfortunately, on the extreme right, which has fueled into what I consider an unhealthy path of uh, Christian nationalism in this country. And so when we look at his context with the United States, we see that here's his chart overlaid on the chart of the United States, and we see that how does that relate to Pluto? Okay, remembering that Pluto had been and is recently in the latter degrees of Capricorn and in the natal chart of the United States at 27 degrees Capricorn. Well, look at here and remember that the whole context of the challenge of uh, our country right now in regards to either consolidation of the plutocracy, the elite billionaire class, versus the democratization of the greater masses of our society, reflected in the Mercury opposition to Pluto, Mercury at 24, Cancer and opposite Pluto. Note that Charlie Kirk's Sun, 21 degrees, Jupiter, 24 degrees, square Mercury, square Pluto in the house of the political economic circumstances of the United States. That Charlie Kirk's identity is part of has been part of a catalyst associated with the Pluto challenge of the United States to uh, understand and embrace the political, economic, and cultural ideologies that are affecting either a support of the plutocracy or and as well a diminishment and dismantling of the democracy of the masses of people, and may further be or had been contributing to the divisiveness associated with uh, highlighting divisions like immigration, nationality, sexual orientation, uh, political party, and or extremist characterizations of uh, political ideologies. So now what I want to do is bring up the chart of Tyler Robinson and how his chart comes into play here. Now, before I continue, if you have found this information helpful and insightful, please like this video And also subscribe to my channel if you'd like to experience and be notified about further spiritual astrology perspectives on life, people, politics, culture, and personal growth. And this is my contact information. So please do contact me if you have further questions and or visit my website at altazarastrology.com. And if you would like a free introductory astrology reading, please do contact me, altazarastrology@gmail.com. And we can arrange for that to occur through a Zoom video chat. So now I'm going to bring up the chart of the alleged shooter, some call assassin, of Charlie Kirk, named Tyler Robinson. So now on your left, you'll see that's not to imply his political orientation, by the way. On the left side of the screen, his natal chart and that of the United States I've already shown. But what I'm now bringing over is the natal chart of Tyler Robinson. So, first of all, I'm going to preface this with a little background information. Tyler Robinson had been uh, discovered and arrested by the FBI due to the promotion of video captured pictures of him supposedly entering the building that, the perch of the assassin had been upon. Um, and Tyler Robinson uh, allegedly confessed to his father, uh, given that his father had seen the media published pictures of the alleged assassin. And Tyler confessed to his father that he was the shooter. And his father encouraged him, along with a minister of local church, to turn himself in. So after he fled the scene in the Salt Lake City area, he returned to his home area in Washington, Utah, where he was raised in a Republican Latter-day Saints or Mormon family, was considered in the top 10% of his high school graduating class, was awarded a 4-year scholarship for, I believe, something like $32,000 for his academic stature. Never actually went to that university for more than a semester, eventually settled into Utah Tech in St. George, Utah, where he was living with a male roommate, allegedly, who was a man engaged in a transgender transformation. So these are information that have been communicated by the governor of Utah about Tyler Robinson, who is currently in the jail there in southern Utah. So Tyler Robinson, what I need to talk about here importantly is to mention just something about his father, and that is that his father was in law enforcement for supposedly around 25 years. Uh, and currently owns a business in Washington, Utah that sells, countertops and kitchen furniture of some kind. Uh, so he comes from, a upper middle class Republican ideology, uh, conservative religion background. Now, what I will say about him is that in his astrology chart, what stands out, and you will see as I have spoken about in prior video, especially the one about comparing Luigi Mangione, the alleged assassin of Brian Thompson of United Healthcare, and his comparative chart to Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, that we find in the chart of violent criminal behavior uh, often an adverse Mars position in that person's chart. And that doesn't mean, those of you observing this video might have an adverse Mars aspect in your chart. That doesn't mean you automatically are going to tend towards being violent. You may tend towards being aggressive. Uh, Charlie Kirk has a Mars-Mercury conjunction in a favorably karmic evolved position of being an aggressive and assertive communicator. Okay. But Mars in adverse angle, symbolic of a negative karmically engaged energy, implies the proclivity towards impatience, uh, egoic aggression, judgmentalism, and or impatience and defensiveness to the extent of utilizing uh, sarcasm, verbosity of denigration, or even outright violence towards those who offend or are different and uh, unrecognized as being connected. So, with that said, Tyler Robinson has Mars in Capricorn at 21 degrees Capricorn. We'll get to the Pluto connection here. And I should point out that, you see, Pluto is the extreme of the challenge towards healing an individual or a society or a country. In other words, it's more of a really intense uh, exposure and uh, need to face an important healing issue that can bring one down to the lowest levels for individuals to self-destructiveness, addictions, or violence, or engage a country, if you will, in a plutocracy that may be engaged in serious exploitative practices of the population economically and with health or deprivation of health care or deprivation of democratic uh, means for engaging political power, etc. And can also indicate divisiveness within a country or society that is not engaged in the healing process of dialogue, discussion, and uh, convincing one side or another towards policies that can then be mutually acceptable. And so these are all symptoms of the Pluto transformation challenge, either towards degeneration and negativity, or higher activation of uh, democratization and dialogue. So Mars squaring Tyler's sun sign at 18 degrees Aries. Now, Aries is the sign of Mars. Aries is the sign of the warrior. And one's sun sign does represent the experience they may have had with their father. And this Mars square, his sun sign, implies that regardless of, what anyone's going to say, relatives or even his own father, that the implication just for him, not necessarily any siblings or anyone else, but the implication for him in regards to his father was on some levels adverse, that he may have experienced his father as controlling, domineering, or just not understanding him and not encouraging his own unique identity, self-expression, and therefore would have a distrust and an anger towards authority. And yet he has Pluto trining his sun sign, and a Neptune sextiling his sun sign. So things are not black and white, cut and dry, just like with Charlie Kirk, who also has kind of an adverse experience with his father, which this implies his father wasn't necessarily uh, the most favorable role model for him in terms of encouraging his identity development. And his father may also have been somewhat of an escapist, uh, or into alcohol, or just an extremist ideology that didn't necessarily encourage Charlie's uh, more authentic identity development. And so in this case, Tyler's father did imply or represent someone who could have a rather favorable uh, relationship with society, and have had uh, an uplifting moral compass, the Neptune, which Tyler had. Tyler was, largely considered a positive, constructive, good boy, top 10% of his class. Pluto trine in hardworking, uh, ambitious, and get inclined to want to affect society philosophically, ideologically, towards a better vision and view of the world and our socioeconomic structure, in which his father also role modeled to a certain extent. So the Mars square implies more of a kind of a personal experience, not personally engaged well with his father, and may have experienced certain anger, control, or abuse that may have been hurtful to Tyler, which fuels an underlying ideological kind of anger. So, how does this play into the whole scheme of things? Well, look at this. Mars, 21 Capricorn, square Sun at 18 Aries. Now, where is that in relationship to the sun sign of Charlie Kirk? Well, the opposite sign of Aries is Libra, and we use about an eight-degree orb of influence. So, in fact, Charlie Kirk has Tyler's sun sign virtually opposite his, with a Mars in this position of Capricorn in a square to his sun. This is found in the relationship compatibility between potentially violent, if not outright angry enemies. So now we're going to bring up the relationship comparison between Charlie Kirk and Tyler Robinson. And this will further offer some demonstration here. Oop. Well, we're going to try that again. So this is the uh, relationship comparison. There we go. Okay. So on your left, and we'll bring up these other charts in a moment, you see Charlie Kirk's natal chart in the inner ring, and in the outer ring, Tyler Robinson's birth chart planets. And so what I'm pointing out here, and the point of a forensic astrology, is to indicate that this is no coincidence. Uh, that that Tyler Robinson, in some way, shape, or form, uh, had been agitated by the communications orientation ideology of Charlie Kirk, and that activated his negative karmic, angry, impulsive, self-righteous inclination to want to take control and put an end to what he considered uh, a challenge or a problem for his life and his feeling about existence, basically. So, what we are looking at here is you see Tyler Robinson's sun sign opposite Charlie Kirk. So, opposites attract, and that's not unusual for even marriages or certain relationships. But it also can imply outright enemies or confrontation and opposites of ideological or personal preferences. But what exacerbates this and turns it into violence is the fact that the Mars of Tyler Robinson in Capricorn, note that that Mars is also almost an exact conjunction with with Charlie Kirk's Uranus Neptune, the symbolism of uh, Charlie's ideological, political, and or spiritual orientation, confrontation, and that Mars is in a direct square, 21 degrees Capricorn, direct, exact square to the sun sign of Charlie Kirk. We have almost within a 3-degree orb, sun opposite Charlie Kirk, and that sun square to Mars in Tyler Robinson's chart, the proclivity, karmic proclivity towards violence, in a direct square to the sun sign of Charlie Kirk. And so then we note how that was very likely, from a forensic astrology point of view, uh, Tyler Robinson's deep-seated, angry, agitated uh, sense of conflict towards Charlie Kirk. Now, there is rumor, there is speculation, which was communicated by the governor of Utah, that Tyler Robinson's roommate is or has been, in a sense, his boyfriend, who is a male engaged in transitioning to female. And we're all well aware that Charlie Kirk espoused quite distinctly conservative attitudes, almost radically anti-transgender and somewhat homophobic. So then we note that in the chart of the United States, we'll get to that, how it relates to the challenge of plutocracy. But what we're indicating here in the from a horoscope point of view is the chart of Charlie Kirk in the inner ring, and in the outer ring, the very moment at 12:23 p.m. on September 10th, 2025, where the planets were when he was shot. Note, the planet Mars at 22 degrees Libra, almost exact, sandwiched in between the exact position of the sun sign and Jupiter of Charlie Kirk. This is not unusual, found in the horoscope charts of uh, well-known historical figures who've been assassinated, and the Mars or Pluto being in positions corresponding with that violent potential. Not to mention that Mars at 22 degrees, we're bringing up the chart now of the United States. You see here, Mars at 22 degrees Libra is, in terms of the chart of the United States, in a square to the Mercury in Cancer at 24 degrees Cancer, and in a square to Pluto of the chart of the United States. And here we have it. I've actually transposed the moment of the shooting. Mars in alignment with Pluto opposite Mercury, symbolic of the continued transformational tension and healing or challenging dynamics associated with the plutocracy of the United States. Now, I should correct that. That's the Mars position of Tyler Robinson being in the position associated with agitating the consciousness, political, ideological, cultural consciousness of the United States, provoked by the violence of Tyler Robinson. And then what we see here on the right, and I don't mean political ideology per se, is Tyler Robinson's chart in terms of where the planets were at the moment that the shot was fired in Salt Lake City. So as I showed before, where they were in Charlie's chart, here they are in Tyler's chart. And again, we see that the Mars in Libra, almost exact square to the Mars in the natal chart of Tyler Robinson, and almost within a couple days, exact opposite of the sun sign of Tyler Robinson. Now, I believe from this astrological point of view that it's no coincidence, as I've talked a bit earlier about the karma of Tyler Robinson vis-a-vis the tension with his father and a certain confrontational, agitational discord that he has had with his father, that it would have and was his father who encouraged him and, in fact, facilitated turning him in to law enforcement and the FBI. So, again, I will summarize by saying that I am not coming from any support of a political ideological point of view here. I'm attempting to present and demonstrate to the world the the truth that can be indicated by forensic astrology and how it can imply the karma of individuals as they have an effect not only on their own soul growth and well-being, but that of the world at large. And in this case, this does imply that a very intelligent, uh, likely well-meaning, but radically activist person uh, who had a large impact on the culture and political uh, mainstream, especially towards the conservative right in our society, had such a provocative and agitating effect on a young man who had and had not yet evolved maturity past his Mars square the sun sign, the anger and agitation experienced in regards to his father, which is not an indictment of his father, but is his own karma of uh, angry impatience and a lack of consciousness of his connection to the world at large that needs to become peaceful and harmonious and utilize democratic principles of uh, discussion and compromise and cultivation of acceptance and patience. So, thank you for following through on this if you've made it to the end. I know I can be long-winded. I do appreciate your subscription for further uh, future videos, and or please do like this video if you have found it insightful.